Okay, well, welcome to my old new location. I'm kind of revisiting. I was here before several years ago and I'm back, so thank you for coming to this show featuring Shirley Woodson. My name is September Gray of September Gray Fine Art Gallery, and we have an amazing artist here, Shirley Woodson, Connections, a Key to Something Else. So we're extremely delighted, yes. And I'm thrilled to have Shirley here. She's like my homegirl. I'm originally from Michigan, so this is, I feel like, you know, the inaugural event of my gallery, the past and coming back, and I'm going back to my past again and finding this phenomenal woman who I didn't know about until 2 years ago, actually. And the more I read about Shirley, the more I'm intrigued about her. So I'm going to share a little bit of her bio with you so you can know a little bit about what she's done over the years, because it would take me all day to read everything, but we're just going to give you a snippet. Shirley Woodson earned a BFA and an MA in painting from Wayne State University, including graduate studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in painting and art history. Woodson's residencies include the MacDowell Colony Fellowship, Petersboro, New Hampshire, the Fabric Workshop and Museum, and the Brandywine Printmaking Workshop in Philadelphia, and the Heritage House Museum in Detroit, Michigan. Most recently, Woodson was named the 2021 Kresge Eminent Artist by the Kresge Arts in Detroit. And she had an amazing retrospective at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Was this a year ago, if I'm correct? Was it last year, Shirley? Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. Her works are included in many public and private collections, including the Detroit Institute of Arts, the Studio Museum of Harlem, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, the Museum of the National Center of Afro-American Art in Boston, Massachusetts, the Schomburg Center for Research and Black Culture, New York, the Florida A&M University, the African American Library in Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, Fayetteville State University in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the Williams Museum, Scripps College, Claremont, California, and the Mott Walsh Collection of Contemporary Art in Flint, Michigan. She's been an art educator and taught in Detroit Public Schools and the Highland Park Community College, appointed as a King Chavez Parks visiting professor at Eastern Michigan University and adjunct faculty at Wayne State University, Department of Art and Art History, and the Department of Art Education. Woodson has received artist grants from the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the Detroit Council of Arts. Other awards include the History Makers Award, the Alan Locke Award from the Friends of African and African American Art, the Detroit Institute of Arts, Delta Sigma Delta, Lillian Pierce, Bembro Arts and Letters Award, and the Coalition of 100 Black Women Arts and Literature Award. Again, we could go on and on and on, but I really want to start with talking about your work. I just want to read a short little dialogue that she wrote. Paintings are my diaries, drawings are my prose, collage is my poetry, assemblages are my dialogue. Water and nature, of course, play a key central point in her work. There's movement and nonverbal language. But I want you to go back and start at the beginning. 6 decades ago, even before I was born, what inspired you to become an artist? I read you started drawing when you were 7 years old, but let's go all the way back to the beginning in your life, early in Detroit. What was the beginning for you?
Well, as I think back, I didn't call it art then, but I was maybe three. I recall I did my first mural. We were renting from another family. My parents came here when I was 3 months old, and I had other relatives that were here. My aunts were here, and one by one, well, Pulaski, Tennessee is where I was born. And I'm from my parents, my mother's family, there were 10 children. And my father's family, there were maybe 6, because I had my grandfather on my father's side, making this long, but you did ask me to start at the beginning.
Yes. We want to know how you got from there and get to here.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
I'm telling you that this is all a part of the history. This is all a part of the history that I always ask questions about. And I was always asking questions about, well, where did he come from? And this one, and I had pictures, but I was always inquisitive. And my mother's life on the farm and all of that, it all leads to what I do now. And at any rate, we were rooming, and my mother was at work, and the lady that we rented from kept me during those early years. And so apparently I took a pencil, found a pencil, and went all the way down the wall. Went all the way down the wall and, drew or had my line. So of course when my mother comes home, she didn't spank me. She just gave me an eraser. And you know what, that would have been on a little pencil, and told me we would erase it together. So by then she got that wall clean, that's all she knew. But anyway, that was sort of my beginning of documenting, I'll say it, on a given space. But I was always interested in art. My other major encounter was when I was in kindergarten, and I later became a student teacher at that school where I was. They had the kindergarten was in the basement room, and I later did my student teaching in that very room, so that was like a connection. But way back, when you got the things from the cleaners, if you remember, some of you remember, they used paper to cover the clothing. And so apparently the teacher had been saving up these cleaners bags, and at the end of the day, one day she said, "Who would like this cleaner's bag? And you can go home and make things from this," and all of that. So I raised my hand, and she gave it to me. So I must have been active, in that area. So I, took my paper garment cover and took it home and did whatever I did on it. But so those were like 2 that I remember. I don't really remember the wall, but I was told that I did the wall. So probably didn't want to think about that anymore. I never did it again.
Right.
So, I had that paper. But, all during this time, my parents were always very supportive of what I did, visually in this way. So.
Were you still in Pulaski, Tennessee at this point? Had you moved to Detroit?
At this way, I'm in Detroit. I came here when I was 3 months old. The family moved.
Okay.
Yeah, so I knew all about, I didn't, of course, remember that, but I always knew that was my beginning. But I'm a Detroiter, basically, by way of Pulaski, Tennessee. So I drew all the way through, I did murals, and I did the Thanksgiving mural at school, and I did Christmas, large, roll out a sheet of paper, and I do large mural, and they'd put it up, this kind of thing. And so when I was in I began like the 6th, 7th grade, I was selected for Gifted Talent program, where you would go to the Art Institute Detroit Art Institute, and on Saturdays, well, actually it was in different schools. So I would go to a school, and it was at one of those classes that the teacher recommended me to go to the Art Institute every Saturday for special classes. And I made up my mind at the age of, I was also taking piano. And my first piano teacher, everybody took piano, so everybody had a piano in their home, so, which always, of course, connected me with music, and you know, that is a natural form for creativity and so on. So I took piano, and I got switched. My mom switched me to another teacher. I'd been going down the street, but she heard of another lady, and this lady was very serious. And she would, you know, I had more advanced material, but I did not like to practice. And so I figured at the age of 14, she was going to make me advanced. She was making me an advanced student. And all I wanted to do was paint. I really didn't want to do any of that. You know, I mean, I had so much more to give. So instead of becoming a concert pianist, I did profess at 14, I am going to be an artist.
At 14.
Yeah, and so I went to the Art Institute for those classes on Saturday throughout high school.
Did you see anybody else in your environment that looked like you, that were artists or trying to be artists at that time, at that young of an age? So who influenced you, or what, when you were looking, were you mainly looking at European art, or you just looking at art?
Well, that's all it was being shown. I didn't know anything about African America. In fact, I grew up thinking, and many of my sisters in art, in growing up, thought the same thing. They were going to be the first ones. I knew I was going to be the first one. Oh. Because there was nothing in my, nothing in any book, nothing anybody said. I knew of the male artists. There were, you know, there were several. Huey Lee Smith. I learned about Huey Lee Smith, but I did not learn about Elizabeth Catlett. I did not learn about Samuel L. Lewis. I did not learn about any of those people. I met Richard Hunt when I was doing my master's, but we were in the same class. Wow. And in Chicago, School of the Art Institute, and but by and large I did not. But it wasn't until I received as a gift a book from my the person who was to become my husband. And he, you know, he knew I had an interest in art. Well, that's what brought us together. So it kind of all went into that. But no, I did not give, my husband was the first person to give me a book on African American art. And I said, oh, look at here, all these people, and it was the Cedric Dover book, by the way. And so it just went from there. And of course I found all of these other people. And so that's how I came to do this.
Right. Right, let's talk about your art for a moment. With all of the vivid colors, the animals, the fish. I don't know if you want to talk about this piece or this particular piece. Talk about the influences of your colors and the meaning and the symbolism in a lot of the work, because there's a lot going on. And I noticed during the opening, people were just, the color brought them in, right. But they were trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? What do the fish represent? What do the horses represent? Are these women Shirley? Is this autobiographical? Is it her family? Talk about your usage of color and your style, your artistic style, and how this grew over time. Or was this something you developed, or did you start? There's collage, of course, in the other room that's totally different than this body of work. But kind of talk about your process and how this evolved over time as you were becoming an artist.
Okay. Well, it's some, you know, many times it's an event or an experience that you go through that, you know, kind of moves you on. When I got out of, by the way, I was an art history minor, so I knew all about, I studied all of Northern Europe, and notice I said all of Europe.
I think we probably took the same classes.
Well, they had their books.
Right.
We weren't in their books.
Right.
And so, but it wasn't until I got the fellowship to McDowell Colony, and I went there right after my master's, and I went in this huge studio. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but Edward McDowell was an American composer. To a Wild Rose, to a, well, he wrote, all these songs were about flowers, all his compositions. And so I had heard all of this music in elementary school because they had a very strong music program in our schools. So anyway, I went and I was in this huge studio. They built all of these studios on this land, and his wife wanted a place for artists to come and do work. So I was in one of the larger studios, and it's called Alexander. And some of them, because they travel the world, they made replicas of certain sites that they'd seen abroad. Well, mine was a Spanish, not a temple, chapel. And so when I got into this, walked into this space, it was actually a small chapel, you know, filled with easels and things like that, you know, to use. And so I looked out onto a glen, and I went in the winter. So it was, you know, it was just so beautiful. And so my one window looked out onto this beautiful glen of, and the light was different. When you go to school at night, you know, because you're working during the day at your job. And so I had been painting all this time under fluorescent lighting. And, you know, and of course the art history, the contemporary art history of the West, of Europe, they were all sort of muted tones and kind of gray. Some of my earlier work, it's the same palette. I have used the same colors, but they're all toned down, so to speak, right? And of course, all the portraits were all white people, and whatever they were thinking about doing. So I said, you know, here I am in this space. This is a whole totally new experience for me, and I've really got to do something different. I got to break out of this, you know, kind of patterning work. And so the work you see at the very end, I did that at McDowell. And I said, well, so I took all my drawings in earlier paintings, and I started cutting them up and replacing, putting things here, tearing, and constructing figures in it, because the light, and then I didn't want a white surface, so I started working on metallic surfaces. So because I hadn't planned for this at all, I went into the arts. I went into the little town, Peterborough, that was, you know, outside of McDowell, and I went to the gift wrap place, and they had all kinds of papers, wrapping papers. So I bought all the silver and the gold wrapping papers. So I brought those back and I started painting on those, because the light was like iridescent. I can't tell you how. And against the snow, it was almost reflective. So I said, oh, I'll start here. So as I said, I would take drawings that I had done in life drawing, and then I did new drawings, you know, that connected that. And I had one work I did, that was when the astronauts went up first time, I guess. And I put everybody in the studio. So it was astronauts in the studio and this one in the studio, but the one that that's in this show was called Beach Scene. Now, why I chose water, I don't know, but it was always a very contemplative.
That's the one on the very end, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The earliest one, 66, and I did that at Great Dow. And then all of a sudden, I stopped toning down the color, and I start, you know, how can I paint this or work on this in all this dull color when the sun has walked in here and it's just bright. So that's basically the way the color did. And I didn't want to do anything that I had been taught to do.
Right.
No,
you wanted to go outside the box.
No, they killed Emmett Till. I mean, I'm living in the world, right?
Right.
So I'm, you know, I wasn't one to, you know, paint a sign that says, you know, be fair. You are not nice people. I did not want to. Yeah, I mean, that's why we survived, you know. You'd be long gone if you went that way. So it was really coupled with my own environment,
right.
What's going on around me. And of course now if you say anything is political, it wasn't political, it was a matter of, you know, being human. So, but that's how the color started, and it just, you know, that's where red became my new black. I mean, I just use color in a different way. I stopped blending white. That's when I said, what things you learn, and you mix your colors, you blend. Well, if you put a red down there, that's too bright. You know, you kind of tone that down. Now, abroad, the other way of what I was learning the art that was affected by the African presence in the Western world.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about a piece in particular that
okay.
I want everybody's input on this.
Yes, but what I'm saying is they had little bits and pieces. I was always drawn to that work, but what I was feeling was happening all over the world, but it was not being looked at in the same way, you know.
Right.
You know, Picasso created everything and so on, although he was stealing all of his images from all our masks.
True.
And everything they packed up along with us on our cruise. So these are all things that are all embedded in my work, and I mean, the bright colors, I said, I want when people come to see this, you know, they're going to say, oh, let me stop and look. And so many other ways of working, which I'll, you know, talk about when you ask me about that.
Well, we can talk about it now if you want to, and just kind of circle back around.
Yeah, you know,
because I want to, you know, which piece I want to talk about.
Yes.
That I'm fascinated with, and I tell people all the time, this is why art history is so important, and why art is so important, because it tells a story, and it engages us, and it educates us, and that's why it's so important to not just look at the piece, but find out why did they create this piece. Now, I want to engage everybody in here before she talks about this. This is a piece that I found, and no one can cheat and look. I want everyone to see this particular piece. And look very closely. Now, when I look at this piece, I see a very light, fun, beautiful piece. It makes me smile. There's some things I'm like, okay, are they playing volleyball? Are there kids out playing? There's a symbolic thing over here, but it's a fun piece to me, and it's very light as I look at it. It just seems very light and fun, and it looks like I just want to go into this piece. It seems very friendly. So just out of curiosity, and anyone can say what they're thinking, when you look at this piece, what do you see?
Turn it that way.
And I want everybody, and take your time.
First thing that comes to my mind is Egypt for some reason.
Okay. Okay.
First thing that comes to my mind is like just kids playing out in modern day times, like in a field or in a playground, on a playground, so just kids having fun.
Right. Right. Anybody else want to take a stab?
See, like someone escaping from something.
Okay.
And I also have the vision that it's being Egypt.
Right.
Running away.
Right. Anybody else?
So I've been a she. I see my childhood because that piece hung in my brain.
Right, so you can't answer this. You can't answer it. Yeah, Shirley's family, no, because you know what this piece is about.
I don't see light. I mean, it being light, it seems to be a very serious piece with the character that's in the middle.
And why does it seem serious?
Well, I see sand on his foot as though they're traveling towards something that they're engaged with, either in preventing or participate or trying to do something.
Right. I didn't see anything. Right. Some energy there. Well, I didn't see it as a heavy piece. I just liked the piece, but I didn't see it as heavy. And when I read the story, I was blown away. I was thinking, how does this woman back in the 1960 talk about the Nigerian Civil War in 1960 when it was genocide in Nigeria, where the British had pulled out of the country and basically millions had died from the Civil War, and she decided to depict it in this picture. But I want you to talk about why this was so important. How does a young woman, I don't know how old you were when you did this particular piece, how did you happen to come across this information about the Civil War going on in Nigeria and all the history behind it and what they were doing to the people, the Biafra people of Africa? And it's interesting, I have a neighbor that is from Nigeria, and he had given me a book about the Biafra War. He was a child soldier. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read it, Well, now I'm definitely gonna read it, because when I read her story about this piece, it blew me away. And I just want her to share the inspiration, how you, at such a young age, painted this piece, and you were just basically telling the history of what was going on, again, in another continent. And that's why we're all so connected in this world, even though we say we're not. And that's why this is so important when we're looking at art and history, because we're learning. And most people probably have never heard of the Biafra War in Africa in 1960, but I just love the way there's a lot of hidden meanings and symbols going like this young gentleman is actually dead. He's lying. Yeah, he's dead, but there's a meaning behind the white background. There's a lot of things going on in this piece, but I want you to talk, first of all, about what inspired you to, or what made you have an interest in this war going on in another continent when we had so much going on over here? Or is it all the same? You know, we're all suffering in different ways.
Right.
But this was the 60s.
Well, I'm trying to think of all my resources. An artist just doesn't say, I'm going to paint a picture. There are a lot of resources. And as I said, I was an art history minor in college and for my master's as well. But the only thing, and everyone was, you know, the revolution was on, the civil rights movement was on, people were getting, you know, I watched everybody in tears with, you know, the dogs on the people in the South, and you know, I mean, you're inundated with all of these things going on. We weren't just sitting there. Some artists were showing the actual things, some were photographing, all those photographs that you see. but my association was with, because that was the only country that was identified in any of art history, and then because number one, you know, in the books, it's disconnected from the continent of Africa.
Right.
Number one, right?
Right.
That wasn't, you know, we always talked about Tarzan's Africa. So I sort of associated myself with Egypt. And, you know, so I did a whole series of using iconography found in the caves from that. And so those are images of, you know, the cave drawings,
Right.
and the tombs.
And I've seen these.
Not the caves, I'm
Right.
sorry, the tombs that took the pharaohs on their village, pardon me, on their travels after death. Okay, so all of these things were things that he was going to need, that were placed either on the walls or in artifacts. It's a little rabbit there that's a jasper rabbit that I saw in the collection at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. So, but I'm calling on all my resources for this information. And then that was a picture that I saw in the New York Times, where during that period, that was the young man that was fallen. He's in the middle of the street with his hands out, and he's, you know, been killed in that. So I put him right in the middle of it. Right. And that's called Flight into Egypt.
And the other thing that I find interesting, even the white background has a meaning. We're looking at all this white space, and because of the war, they placed an embargo, of course, on the continent, and they were so strategic about doing this. They had no food, basically. They were starving the people. So they were just abandoned. And all they had to eat, I'm trying to remember, was possibly, there was this, no meat, no vegetables. Most of them were dying from malnutrition. And I think the only thing they had to eat was this white substance, starch. Their diet was reduced to 100% starch. So that's why she paints the background all white, to represent that. So if you get a chance to this story just moved me. And again, I found it so informative. And of course, now I want to read the book from my neighbor that was actually a child soldier in this war. But again, how art...
Yeah, all the levels of suffering that are on there every day as they, and I've forgotten the kind, because the Chinese are now, and everybody else, all the things we use in our phones. What's that called?
Oh, those microchips?
Yeah. That's where they get the main ingredients. And so our children there are in the mud and all of whatever else, what they need, and are mining. Yeah, so that we can have well, not only that, everybody in the family can have a phone, and you know, it's ridiculous.
It sounds like a new series,
yeah.
Shirley.
Pardon me?
That sounds like a new series for you to work on.
Oh, that's being played out on the television.
Oh, okay.
No. It's just that all these things come to mind. I'm saying it's not made. Paintings are made for beauty. They're made to interest, and it helps those who see it and want to embrace that or see that on a daily basis, because then it means that there's more ways. We have found so many ways to reflect our heritage and reflect identity. The big thing now is everybody wants to identify, because all of 400 years we've been unidentified.
Right.
You know, so every artist has a message, and some of the things, let's see, which one? Oh, is there a mirror in this one?
Yes, that has the mirror.
Okay, so I started doing mirrors because I wanted the viewer to know that they're in the water, and that person, that image that they see in the mirror is themselves, because if you're in the water to bring you up close and be in it, that's your reflection that's in the mirror. Because in terms of perspective, it's the people are in the water, person's in the water, but it's reflecting somebody beyond that figure. So, and that figure is you. And so you can walk into, so I was trying to do other things with that to make a person want to come and, look at it for more than, in passing, oh, okay, to go from one to the other. I really wanted to do it in that way. So there are a lot of elements that people put in their work that are, maybe flashes of memory or something, much like we think. I mean, I was trying to get to the viewer on another level where, we're here, but, your minds are other places too. I mean, you're thinking of this, you say, oh, when I leave here, I got to do this, So it was the kind of placing you in a stream of consciousness so that make art do what it's supposed to do, is to put you in another place, develop your thoughts beyond that, and still know that you're, I don't know, just know that you're aware. It's about awareness too. There are a couple of quotes that I want to make. I remember Romare Bearden was, he was speaking at the Art Institute in Detroit, and he relates that this person in the arts walked up to him and said, well, gee, do you think that black people understand surrealism? Do you think they understand that? He says, understand surrealism. He said, we live surrealistic lives. So,
right.
Of course, our lives are total surrealism. So we have no problem with seeing this up in one corner and that something seemingly unrelated, because, in everyday life, you say, well, we couldn't make this up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
No matter how hard I try. And besides, I got to be somewhere in a meeting. So you got to switch, from a grief to happiness to, oh boy, I got to take care of this. Right. I mean, we're living like that all the time. So it's not, it is a pretty picture, but it is not only a pretty picture. So I developed the water came from, really the water came from a program, public radio. This author had written a story about, I guess, and that would have to do with the climate change. We'd been reduced, everybody who was now living, they were like on a Noah's Ark. Everybody lived in a boat. The whole, everybody, because there was no more land, there was nothing else they could survive on. And so I thought about that. I kept going back. It was really well done. And it was on radio, so all you do is imagine. But I thought, well, that's what we are now. We're in water, and we're surviving. It's all about survival. And so that's where I think that water concept, and of course the earth is the major part of, the earth is water. Right. So we've just kind of crossed environments, and of course we've had our water experience, right? So it's like, I know when I would talk to my students, teaching art history or the other courses, I would say, can you imagine, this was not a cruise, right now everybody's going to Greece and here and all around. And I said, this is not a cruise. I mean, this is where we lived and died. Now we're being sold it back again. No, let's get back on the other subject of triangular trade. You know, let's keep bringing it back, but you know, you can't survive and stay on the hurt. You've got to go beyond it, but you can't forget it. And you have to know that you do something every day to counter it, but be strong in that. So that's where I got the water theme. And that water, everybody experiences water. All the art periods had, you know, they were about water. Water means survival, healing, baptism, you know, we understand that concept. So those are all things that are blended in. So I started painting the water, and then what goes in the water? Well, what goes in the water is, you know, shells, fish, flowers sometimes, if it's on the border of something, land and sea. So I went back to those things to put in the painting, and the bathers, the swimming. So over the, 50 years, 60 years, it seemed to me in my painting, every 10 years, I seem to take on something new, a new theme, but always, I never leave the other, but you know, so you kind of associate it with whatever is of interest to you. So there was one whole thing where I did shells in the water, and the shells were bigger, you know, were sometimes the main factor. And then from childhood, I always envied those people who could draw animals. And they had all the books, but you know, the horses are so beautiful. And so then I started putting my figures in the water on the horse. And of course, there's the biblical flight into Egypt.
Was that the title of your show at the DIA? Was it Flight into Egypt or the Nile?
It was the Nile.
The Nile, okay.
Right, yeah, so I did a whole thing on that.
Nile.
Yeah, the Shield of the Nile. But I'm just saying there's it really came from my experience, so just going back into it and, you know, re-relating to it. And the horse came in as the retreat. When, you know, they took, Herod was going to kill all the children. So Mary and Joseph, that story, you know, they're returning, they're leaving, going into Egypt to escape the, you know, all of that history. So it's kind of a blending of, you know, Christian, I don't know, like, whatever, Christian, I don't mean I like to say it, but I know that it was always interesting because I went, and my neighborhood was, it was minority black children. So I remember telling my friend, one of my friends, she was Catholic, okay? And I told her that Jesus was Jewish. He was not. But then I had to realize that they went to catechism, right? You had catechism. And so all of these different things, you know, I would say, and I said, girl, you need to go to church. I don't know what they're telling you. You know, I mean, now everybody's, my Jesus. Well, I mean, that's still right there. I don't know anyone else to call. Right? I mean, we say, and I know we say that every day too, for one reason or another. But you know, so it's actually it's there. But anyway, the horse was a part of that, and I never really knew how to. I never drew a horse because I didn't draw that well. I didn't draw that well to draw the horse. I was drawing other people, other things. But anyway, so I started painting horses in my work. So, and they were holding a shield from the shield of the Nile. And sometimes they would hold a fish. Sometimes they would hold a shell. And so that was another element that became a part of my work. That one, yeah, she's on the horse. I did a whole series. And so about every 10 years, I kind of changed the focus, and but then the color brightens. The color becomes more straightforward. And as I said, for a whole while there, I've kind of returned to putting, you know, mixing a little with white. But I didn't want to, I said, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to do the raw color. And I might do red with another color, red with a blue. And then I did that for a while, and so I was getting all these purples, and, you know, so it'll go that. But I felt that was much more real for me. And
now over here you have an angel. Made the connection with us. You know, the
On
title of the
Angel
show is
Wing.
Connections, a key to something else. So you've made the connections with the water, the animals, the shells. Make the connection with Angel.
oh yeah, well I did a series in collage on angels, and those are all my ancestors.
Beautiful.
My great grandmothers, and a lot of them, and she was an angel. And a lot of the works here will show that figure, or those figures. The wing became sort of an iconographic image. Sometimes the wing would just show up, you know. And so when I painted that, that's why I called it On Angel Wings. So I was relating to that.
That's beautiful.
And sometimes all the emphasis is on a single figure, and sometimes it's on other things too. I have a couple that are I have two vases in the studio. One was my mother's vase, and the other was given to me by my mother-in-law. And so I wanted to see how that worked out, because one was, you know, sort of a 1920s Art Nouveau kind of, and she got another one from the islands, so it was wooden and hand carved. The other was a ceramic. And so then I said, well, I'll use this form to pay homage to people who've been very important.
Right. Like this one is to Sarah
That's Sarah Vaughan. That's Sarah Vaughan. It doesn't look like Sarah Vaughan. It wasn't made to look like Sarah Vaughan. It's just that it was about her vases over here in the water, and their fish and flowers with this work.
And the other one, in the other room on the far wall, is that Toni Morrison?
It's Toni Morrison, right?
Pronounced
Toni Morrison.
Yes.
Yeah, and Toni Morrison. What I learned in hearing her, you know, being introduced to her as a writer and essayist, that she only wrote about black people. The interchange about black life. And of course, when she got the prize, the Pulitzer Prize for literature, everybody was all over her saying, well, are you going to ever write anything about white people? She said, well, first thing she said was, how dare you? Did you ask so-and-so, when was he going to write about black people? Why are you asking me? She says, you know, I'm writing about this. And of course, you know, she was awarded heavily for it, and has written books and all of that. But her point was, I'm at the center. And that was the other thing that I learned. And one thing that we are all learning is that we put ourselves at the center, and everything else is around us. Because all of our lives, all of our parents, they put up a model And they said, this is not just only in looks, but in thought. You're not even there. They were showing how in theater and all of these other forms, you're on the edge. The early paintings, you know, the nice European setting, and the maid is in the corner. Not only is she in the corner, but she's back in the shadows. She's on the periphery. And so my approach is that we're at the center, and if it makes it on the periphery, fine, but it's not my center. And somehow that makes you feel better, because that's what it is. And if you look at the world, you know, we're every day we're confronted with, well, why didn't you know, where are all the black people? I mean, you're putting out these new shows all the time, and there's nobody black in those worlds. You know, our favorite shows. I look at this. So we're learning more about their concepts and their ideas and their development and foibles and all of that. But there's nothing, if ours is done, it's done in a comedic way, not real. I mean, you know, I mean, everybody doesn't have all those kinds of interactions in their home. And if they do, let's look at it and take a look at it like they decipher and see where we are. And so then you do see the world from a different perspective, and you do understand. So you can put that part out of your mind. I know why I feel that way, so I don't have to worry about that. Let me see what's really going on.
I love that, putting yourself at the center.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about you as an artist and putting yourself at the center during the time that you came up, 60s or 70s. I really would like to know, and I'm sure a couple of other artists here would like to know, did you feel you had to prove yourself as an artist, or a great woman artist, or a great black woman artist? Did you ever feel that you had to prove any of those? I'm a great artist, I'm a great woman artist, or I'm a great black woman artist. Did you feel that during that time period, this is what I'm out to prove, or this is what I need to prove?
Well, I tried to use the quote, recognize standards of excellence and all of those things. I read there's a book that came out, it was called, Vanguard Artists? Maybe so. Can't remember. Written by, I think it was Harold Rosenberg. Anyway, he did this thing on American artists, and they had a section on there called Negro artists. And they were all interviews. But for the Negro artists, they only interviewed white people about Negro artists. I said, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture.
Right.
And this is what they said. This is what see, you know, it's one thing in art school, you know, you learn that once you're in the art area that there's no prejudice, there's no nothing, it's just everybody just wants to do beautiful stuff and, you know, but it's all this underlying stuff. So why, if you're going to talk about some Negro artists, why don't you interview a Negro artist? But they didn't. But here's what they said. Oh yes, I remember so-and-so, he named some artist. That I was in school, he was good, but his work just didn't click. Well, no, it didn't click for you, but all of them, you know, about 10 artists were interviewed, and they all white artists. What did they think? Why are you asking what they thought? That was an easy book to write.
Right.
You know, and all the other parts were about, you know, Rauschenberg and this one and that one and the other. And you like some of those works. So what happens is, even in looking at other works, you know, you have to keep in mind who you're measured against and why. And you find out there's a whole bunch of more reasons.
Right.
And the way they've done African art, they said, oh, well, if you don't buy your art from a European dealer, if you don't buy your African art from an antique dealer, bona fide African dealer. If you don't buy any of that, then whatever other people are selling, it has no value. So if you sold it,
It's not authentic.
it's no, that's not the real thing. But if I sell it, oh yeah, I got the best thing.
Right.
Because I have, the thing they said was the older art. Well, no, maybe not. Maybe you don't have privy to that. But in the 70s, 80s, the African dealers were over here like crazy, selling to museums, because they knew they had some good stuff too, the older works too. But they just sort of made that as a rule for that. And black people have said it too, you know, but that is not true. I mean, it's like anything else we hear now. It's just not true.
Right.
Because then what about all the thousands of artists from the 54 countries that come over? You mean none of that's good? Nothing I've done since you found it in my place?
Right.
You know, it's not good anymore?
You know, it's not good until they put their stamp on it.
They put their stamp on it. But you mean I didn't stop doing work? So you're saying that anything that comes after what I have has no value. And that is not true.
Right.
So as a collector, I always wanted to have original African art as a part of that collection, so that so I kind of continue those connections. And no, I don't have a sample like from the Met. You can't get all that stuff in the Met, including the temple they drug out of there. So you go to that. You have to go, because they got the African, then they've got the Egyptian, and so you see their exhibits are beautiful. So there are a whole bunch of stuff that we're thinking as we go back. When we're at the center, there's a big thing. Why should the countries are demanding that some of the art be returned?
Right.
Coming out of Belgium, where they're the ones that killed Lumumba and had all the art. And they are not giving up on the fact of keeping the hierarchy there still. And they said, well, we want our art back. Says, well, you don't have anywhere to keep it. So so the countries are now saying so, and we're saying, so what? You keep it to keep it, but it's mine and I want it back. And it says, well, you don't have a museum. Well, no, I don't have a museum. It's okay, it wasn't made in a museum. So, well, you can't. So, I mean, there are all these issues that are still right on the table right now, that Africa, the continent, is going back trying to reclaim. Well, they're reclaiming it, and of course seeing how all that goes. So that's all a part of it. That's all my underlying meanings that you'll find in each work. And so otherwise I'm trying to figure out why would I paint it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's always going to go on. The powers that be are going to want to have the best of each country, and they think it's their right. If they've got the institution and the money, they think it's their right. Right.
So there's so many things that apply in the artwork, and the thing for purchasers are to know that you are a part of whatever you get, that it's for those things, but understand that it is all a part of our resilience.
It is, our resilience.
Our resilience and the perspective. And so, are there...
Well, I just want to, everything that I've read about you, Shirley, has just been how important you are to the community. You're not only an artist, you're an historian, you're an art activist. You've been so important in your community of helping others and reaching out and really giving back to your communities. So I want to talk about your journey, because again, everything I've read about you, Shirley's done so much for the community. She's so giving of her time and her resources and encouraging us to be artists or to learn more. Through your journey as an educator, an artist, an art activist, what role do you feel or do you feel you wore that was more important, or do you feel they were all the same?
Oh, they were all the same. It was all the same. You know, I guess in terms of being a teacher,
the word they use for you is nurturer. You nurtured so many people, and I love that.
Yeah, yeah. But basically, I guess I like to party, and I don't want to go to the party by myself. You know, I mean, you don't want to just be the only one knowing this.
Right.
You know, let's share it and celebrate, and now we really can talk about some things.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let's share it and let's celebrate.
And it'll give you the strength you think you need if you're centering it. And so my work with teachers of art and students of art, you know, because we're all combating the same thing. It's, well, you know, it's life. And so that's...
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's share and celebrate. I'm a big component of that. As a matter of fact, the second floor of the space is called the upper room, and the upper room, as we know, is where truth happens, right? Those of us that went to church. And that's a space to share and to celebrate, where artists, community can come together and have these conversations.
Right.
Because I think it's so important. Back in the day, you had Afro-Cobra, you had Spiral, you had all of these Harlem Renaissance where they came together and shared, and I think we need to get back to that space where we're coming together as a community and sharing.
Yes.
But I did want to open it up for questions.
Yes.
For those that wanted to ask questions to Shirley. Or
Oh, we love them.
I'm curious with the images that I'm seeing here, they all have a certain seriousness on the face of the characters, and they're appears to be female. Is that intentional?
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain, you know, there's a certain look, there's a certain demeanor that, you know, just so that questions are asked, you know, in terms of identity. And, you know, I grew up, I did not have a black doll. You know, I mean, you're talking, you know, I did not have a black doll. I only had one black teacher in my life, and that was in college. That was my drawing teacher, and he also taught art history. He taught art history. And so when you got to the area of African art, because of the literature before it that he's using at his reference, he would talk about the work in general is so many inches high and all of that, and it was used as so-and-so. And it was used to, you know, at a certain time. Or so, and it wasn't until I researched it further that I found out, you know, that the mask is only part of the well, for lack of a better term right now, the costume. So it's the mask is here, so we get the mask, but the full mask covers the whole body. So you've got the raffia here, you've got this, you've got the clothing. So you have everything, and one was to make you have a good harvest. One would be to celebrate. So the dance, so it was like all one. Everything was one. The dance, becoming something else, becoming a deity, all of that. So in the new life, the new experience, that was taken away, and you end up with the drum, and then you couldn't use that. You know, New Orleans used to have the circle and everybody come and play their drums. That was another kind of experience. So, but I'm just saying, it's like putting all the pieces back together and doing research. So that's what I did at an early time. So my thought was that let's start from the beginning. So when I was teaching, we were doing people, I'd say, well, I'm giving everybody their paper. We're going to make whatever it would be that day, and so I would always pass out the brown paper. I said, no, we're not going to color anything in. We'll already be it. So if the kids were making angels, or if they were making whatever kind of figure they were making, I would give them that color, and so that they wouldn't have to, try to find a brown crayon. And the height of, I thought it was wild, Crayola now has a thing where they have all the different shades of brown. So if you want, and they call them different, they call them different names. So it was that kind of thing that I was interested in. Let's start here. Let's don't start with me having to make myself a certain color. Let's just start with being the color. Or, you want a red truck, I'm not going to color my truck red. Let's just start with the red and I'll have my truck, or I'll have my this. So we have to think, because, our whole psychology is based on all, that we've experienced. So you've got to go beyond a lot of that, which happens over a lifetime, on how that happens. So.
Thank you for being here. This is such a precious experience.
Oh.
It really is. Thank you so much.
Oh, certainly.
I do have one more question. What's next?
What's next?
Yes, what's next for Shirley Woodson?
I don't know, maybe I'll ask, September.
Oh, okay. Well, I will share a little secret. I'm doing a wonderful show in Chicago in January of 2024 called Decadence of Another Kind. I'll keep you informed if you're on my mailing list, and there'll be an article that will come out in Essence Magazine in the November issue featuring 12 artists, but Shirley will have work. But I'm not going to tell you the secret, but she's doing a vase homage to another very well-known entertainer in the 21st century. So she's up to date on different people. We have Sarah Vaughan, Toni Morrison, so she's taking it to another level. So she's going to debut that piece in Chicago. So that's January the 19th, 2024. So that's definitely next for you, Shirley, and hopefully with more pieces than that. So
Yeah,
I know that's next.
We're working on it.
Yes, Decadence of Another Kind. Just remember that. So
Decadence.
Decadence.
Oh.
And then I use the Shakespearean quote, "To thy own self be true," or as they would say, keeping it real.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Yes.
Okay.
I had actually two questions.
Yes.
One, which one of these paintings that you hold dearest to your heart? And two, which one do you find more joy in, the teaching or the actual painting?
I love to teach. I love to teach, but that's no, the painting is when you face yourself. So that's the most difficult. I mean,
Is there one of these that you hold closer to your heart, like maybe
all of them. Right. The ones that I think are I hold in equal would be the collages, because that's my family, and I've done several shows based on my family, and they're all collage form. Right. So right now, the current one is that group, the vase group. They're called Offerings. And so I have, there's Journey, At the Crossroads, and there are other There's a title for each of those 10 years that kind of cross over into the other.
Another question, Shirley?
Pleasure being here. So how old were you when you first started painting? And the second question, when did you discover your gift that you were a gifted artist? Like, did you when you were 10, when you were 15, when you were 5?
Oh, I always drew. I mean, I always was, you know, all through grade school,
Okay.
right, and then high school.
So you got an A+ when you were like 6, 7 years old in art?
They didn't do pluses. No, I usually got. No, I'm from the group before there was ABC.
Okay.
It was E and F.
Oh.
No, if you got E was for excellent.
Nice.
Yeah, that was early on.
We can imagine what the F was for. Failed.
Well, what was E? What was that? It was a nice. Yeah, I can't remember those. I'll tell you one thing I did get. Did I flunk that? I was in school, and the only low grade, I guess I got a D. And that was in, if you'll believe, I got it in aesthetics. I couldn't respond to the way they were teaching it. I mean, I guess I did. I mean, it's added on there, and I didn't fight it. But that was the only one. It was in aesthetics, and I thought aesthetics meant one thing, but it meant something else. And it was given to me by TA. What's that?
Teaching assistant?
Yeah, it was given to me by the teaching assistant who just didn't like my style. You know, well, it was, you know, it was like on the side, a little personal thing. We worked at the same little side job, right? Little summer program, and he was, you know, that was that time.
So you were pretty like, what, 10, so you were in high school or grade school, you discovered you wanted to be an artist. As you're like,
Oh, a solid 14.
okay.
Yeah, I made it. I said it to somebody. You know, if you're not going to do it, don't say it.
Right.
So, try to keep my word. Yes.
So when you were a child, were you drawing realistic, you know, like a horse or
Oh, yeah.
person face? And
Oh, no, I
how
didn't.
accurate was that drawing? Were you good with that?
Yeah. But, you know, they didn't pay much attention. The ones who drew were the boys. They drew because they drew comic books. And they knew how to draw people in motion and all that. Girls, they drew models.
Okay. What was the transition, or do you remember when you decided, well,
Oh, when I got-
abstract stuff?
Oh, in fact, I said when I started college, I said, well, I'm going to be an abstract painter anyway. I said that to myself.
Wow.
But it never worked that way. I mean, I did, but the first few, they were kind of like that, you know, but it wasn't, you know, like, what did I say? You know, I really wasn't interested in that kind of communication, because nobody would know what I was talking about. Some artists know how to do it very well, but everybody starts figuratively, you know, and then you branch out. Yeah, so, on your question, you're always learning, you know, no matter what you do, you'll say, oh, I know what I'm going to do with that next time, or, you know, you know all of your weaknesses, or what you term to be a weakness, you know, but there are always things that you're striving for in your work. Right.
One more question.
Yes, in this talk you've been very open about your thoughts on Europeans and their approach to how they view us. Were you able to be that open when you were teaching to your students? And how do you feel about would you teach today in an environment where openness is looked on differently?
Well, what I would do when I was teaching art education for, art, I put everybody on a research track. And so I would say, look up the following artists who are in this, who do mixed media. Look up these artists. And I would put all the artists that I knew that use mixed media. And so they had to learn. It's a matter of what's in front of you.
Yes. So
I didn't say anything about the white people or any of that. I mean, I'm just talking I'm talking about overall. I'm not talking about the little artists in my class. Yeah, I'm talking about the structure. I'm just saying that if you're going to study artists, I would, well, yeah, they would have to, so I would have Robert Rauschenberg, who's one of my favorite. I would talk about all those people who do that big mixed media stuff. I would talk about Sam Gilliam, whose works were not on stretchers necessarily, but he draped. And so they would have to, there would be a list of artists. I'd just go flat art, they'd find out who they were. You know what I mean, like it was no, and they'd have their book. They would have resources, said to read this source, I would be able to tell them where to go and find what they needed. Yeah, it wasn't that wasn't their beef. I just wanted them to know that they were not out there. That it was centered so that no matter who the student was, they would get the whole, a bigger picture, be a bigger picture, right?
Instagram has a question. Stone and brick artworks, they want to know, do you feel relaxed or tense, or do you ever feel like you're struggling in some of your work when you're making some of your work?
Repeat that.
Oh, wait a minute.
Got to find it again.
I wonder if Miss Woodson feels relaxed or tense, or feels like she struggles when she works.
Well, that depends on what stage of the painting you are. If you're just starting off and you're putting on your first coat, you feel wonderful. As soon as you put that first mark on there, then you're committed. And then you have to uncommit and then go back in. Yeah, the hardest, the most frustrating, the tense part is somewhere in the middle. It's like going on a journey and I'm not using a map, but I know it's over there somewhere. And so once you start off, you're doing okay, and then all of a sudden I said, where am I? What? Now you did this, you did that. Well, maybe if I hook this over here, and maybe if I hook that, So the journey is once you get in there, And then some things, they just plague you till the very end, and you finally make a decision. So it's a bit of both. Right.
Any other questions?
Are you an artist, young man?
Oh, no, ma'am. I'm just interested.
Oh, good. We need you.
Well, Shirley, thank you
Yes.
so much for being here. As you said, all of these pieces are close to your heart. Well, you're close to our hearts.
Thank you, dear.
No, this has been a delight. I love having you work here. I love the conversation. I like how you connected everything. And art is a connection to keys to something else. So make sure you spend some time with Shirley while she's here.
Yeah.
We have this precious, wonderful woman in our city for one more day. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your work. with the gallery and with Atlanta. We're just honored to have you. And thank you all for being here so much. This is why we're here. This is why we do this, so we can give you this opportunity to see the work and meet the legendary Shirley Woodson.